Well, good morning again. This room is filling my heart with so much joy right now. It's moments like this where we grasp the highest aspirations of our faith and the interconnectedness of over 5,000 Unitarian Universalists across our state. Can I get an amen? Amen. It is a deep privilege to be here with you all this weekend, joined by pilgrims across our state observing the 125th anniversary of the coup and massacre here in Wilmington. And as Michael mentioned, my name is Reverend Lisa Garcia Simpson, and I proudly serve as the Executive Director of the Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry of North Carolina. We currently work with over 24 congregations across our state, not the Sandhills yet, though. Brenda, let's talk. With the mission of joyfully organizing UUs to co-create a transformative movement for justice through spiritual grounding, collaboration, and imagination. We support congregations in their justice work. We work in very close relationship with our national UU partners, and we are uniquely positioned to work at a state level and organize UUs to contribute to statewide campaigns and movements for justice. Not too long ago, my job afforded me the opportunity to be in conversation with someone I never imagined I'd be on a first-name basis with. One of the most prophetic voices in our faith today, the incredible Paula Cole-Jones. And whenever I talk to her, I try to play it cool, but if I'm honest, I'm always a little starstruck. So we're on the phone, it's pretty late at night, it's like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And we're talking about the brutal legislative session that we have had this year in Raleigh, when suddenly she stopped and said, "Lisa, are you outside?" And I was outside. I was walking my dog Cooper, and I immediately apologized, thinking she couldn't hear me over the cars. How rude, this is Paula Cole-Jones. But then she said, no, Lisa, that's not what I meant. And then she said, "Lisa, look up at the moon." And I did. It was such a simple thing. I just looked up, and something happened. After a really hard week, when I was so wrapped up in my own situation, that act pulled me out of my head and into a larger consciousness. We spent a few minutes just raptured by that crescent moon, how beautiful it feels to be two people separated by hundreds of miles, but looking up at that same moon. We imagined how many people on our planet at that very moment were looking up at the moon, discerning their own work for justice in this moment in history. It made me feel so small, and I don't need help feeling small. And yet it made me feel so deeply connected to this abundant, loving movement, larger than our state, larger than our faith, larger than we can even imagine. And it reminded me of something that had just occurred the day before. That weekend, I had been right here in Wilmington as the movement chaplain for a community safety training. This 2-day training is no joke. It's for people working to keep our movement safe at abortion clinics, at drag story hours, voting sites, churches, school board meetings, and all the places where extremist groups are creating real safety threats in our state. At lunch, you let me know, I'll show you the pictures of Michael Sheridan practicing doing eye washes for Peter Rowich in case of a scenario in which Peter gets pepper sprayed, which, let's be honest, Peter, it's a distinct possibility. Your own congregational leaders were there alongside UUs from Morehead City, and our movement partners across the East Coast to learn about situational awareness, de-escalation, and other important skills. And this came at a time when the Unitarian Coastal Fellowship of Morehead City was discerning whether to hang a progress flag. And more broadly, they were discerning the risks of becoming more visible as a beacon of progressive values in a very small and conservative town. During one of the breaks, I checked in with their minister, Reverend Micah, to see how they were doing, and they said that their congregational leaders had come to equip themselves with the skills to keep their community safe in case they were ever targeted for doing something visibly progressive. But Reverend Micah said it was a powerful thing that they were discerning a call to courage and recognizing that the danger that they were choosing to lean into is for many not a choice, but an inescapable reality. But Micah said that by far the most important thing that they had learned that weekend was not skills or awareness of their privilege, but the realization that they were not alone. These congregational leaders looked around the room, not only at fellow UUs, but at this larger beloved community in our state, and viscerally understood that they belonged to a larger movement for justice, working shoulder to shoulder in shared values and shared vision, even when hundreds of miles apart. Perhaps there's a sense in which that was their looking up at the moon moment. And maybe, just maybe, that experience influenced their congregation's decision to ultimately hang that progress flag following the passage of North Carolina's Don't Say Gay bill, the ban on gender-affirming care for minors, and the ban on trans youth playing sports. That flag will be a beacon of love and resistance in their town. That is no small thing. We are undoubtedly living through a moment where we are all being called to courage, both within and outside the walls of our congregations, to show up in alignment with our values and solidarity with those who are most vulnerable in our communities. So don't forget to look up at the moon and know that the abundant love and power of this movement is here to sustain you and to guide you. On Tuesday of that same week, I was at my monthly art club for local justice organizers in Durham to explore our work through creative expression. My watercolors are pretty bad, but I'm told that's not the point. It's led by the Jewish Studio Project and always begins with a Jewish text study, and that is the second time that week that the moon came to me with a lesson. The text study was about the particular week in the Jewish calendar that week that specifically recognized the holy day of Shavuot, which marks the occasion when the Israelites were journeying in the wilderness in the darkest of nights, when Moses went up to the mountain to receive the 10 Commandments. This is a story I know pretty well, maybe you do too, but what struck me was the reference to the moon. It was the third new moon since they had escaped from Egypt, and the new moon is the darkest point in the moon cycle because it's the moment when the moon is in conjunction with the sun, and its dark side is towards the earth. For all you Pink Floyd fans out there, it is literally the dark side of the moon. I was struck by this story because it reminds us that we are called to have faith. That in the darkest, scariest moments in the wilderness, we can give birth to something new. And the new moon reminds us that our world is ever turning, ever unfolding, and that change is revelation. That change is itself sacred. That is the wisdom that earth-centered and astrological and Eastern religions teach us, and it is a core truth to our own living tradition of Unitarian Universalism. Beloveds, by so many measures, we are in the dark night in the wilderness. The pandemic January 6th, the rise of extremist groups, the fall of Roe v. Wade, the monster abortion ban in North Carolina, the monster voter suppression bill in North Carolina, gerrymandered maps, banned books, attacks on public schools, trans youth, drag story hours, and the list goes on and on and on. We are in that dark night. And revelation is emerging. I think one of those revelations is that there is, in fact, a majority of people in this fractured state of North Carolina who fundamentally want the same things. But it is a minority of powerful people in our state with hateful and greedy agendas who are exquisitely skilled at dividing us, at convincing us that we can't all have health care, we can't all have good-paying jobs and well-funded schools. They feed us that false narrative of a zero-sum game, and fear does the rest. But friends, we know our history. We are here this weekend because we know our history. And we know that collective thriving is possible because it happened right here in Wilmington, North Carolina. Before the atrocities of 1898, fusion politics and the growth of commerce in the port city created a reality where both Black and white residents of this city were thriving economically, socially, culturally. There was a multiracial board of aldermen. There was a multiracial representation in our state's General Assembly. Democracy was being realized right here. But then the propaganda, but then the fear, but then the very, very skillful organizing violently halted the boundless trajectory of this city, and instead became the catalyst of the white supremacy movement and the rise of Jim Crow segregation, not only here in North Carolina, but across the South. I think the important point to remember here is that the majority of people in 1897 embraced fusion politics and were experiencing collective thriving, but a mob of the minority employed fear and violence when democracy was not on their side. Does this sound familiar? Is it not the same today? In this state that is growing in racial and age diversity, growing in progressive values, that a minority view is employing propaganda and violent extremist groups and gerrymandered maps in an effort to retain money and power. Is it not the same, my friends? We are in the dark night in the wilderness. But if we listen, in the wind and from the sacred ground, the ancestors of Wilmington whisper, there are more of us than them. In August, the ancestors were with us at the New Hanover County School Board meeting when the people of Wilmington showed up in massive numbers for the meeting where the school board discussed banning the book Stamped by Ibram X. Kendi. And if we heard our story for all ages this morning, you of course know how dangerous this man's ideas are. I'm sure many of you know, but for some out-of-towners here today, these new Hanover County School Board meetings have become a place where the Proud Boys show up in large numbers to intimidate anyone advocating for progressive values And that has included, on at least one occasion, loudly taunting trans youth as they testified to their school board about their experiences in school. As a member of our state safety team, I drove in to join their local safety crew that was marshaling the event, and I was on the crew facing the woods, because that's where the Proud Boys like to emerge out of, wearing their brass knuckles and their bandanas over their faces for added intimidating effect. But guess what? On that day, the Proud Boys never emerged from the woods. Local leaders strongly believe that the massive turnout of over 300 people, including 50 members of this congregation, kept the Proud Boys in the woods that day. There are more of us than them. Amen? Amen. That's right. And this congregation is an example to use across our state of the power of our faith. And friends, we are just getting started. In our communities across the state, we are finding our courage and our power from this revelation. This year, our movement celebrated the biggest win in a decade, the massive expansion of Medicaid in North Carolina, and I am thrilled to say that on December 1st, in 18 days, but who's counting? Who the hell? I am counting. In 18 days, Medicaid will finally be enacted, giving over 600,000 people in our state new access to health care. Can I get an amen? We helped do that. It took us 12 years. And people kept saying that it was never going to happen because propaganda and political narrative said, no, the people of North Carolina don't want health care. Not if a black president is the one trying to give it to us. Let's tell the truth about that. Can you believe we fell for that for 12 years? That is how strong the false narratives are moving through our state right now. But together, our Medicaid expansion movement from the mountains to the ocean, spanning generations and racial identities, and yes, eventually even political identities, kept fighting and believing that this day was possible, and now, my friends, this day is here. We are in a new moon moment, and we are called to do the hard work, the courageous work, the uncomfortable work. Not just showing up against book banning, that's easy. For our crew, that's easy. Not just learning the history of 1898, that is easy. But by honoring 1897 and creating a North Carolina of collective flourishing and fusion politics that we know is possible because the ancestors of this great city showed us how. Let's do that hard work. Finally, like the new moon, the full moon also offers us deep wisdom. It is the moment when the sun will illuminate the entire moon, making her the brightest object in the night sky. That big bright sphere reminds us that we are not meant to just survive in the wilderness. Beloveds, we are meant to dance under the light of the moon. We are meant to know abundance and thriving. One final story. When I first came to North Carolina and took over our state justice ministry, I felt very insecure about my role in the movement, particularly because joy has always been the deepest instinct of my spirit. It's a core part of my identity and my ministry. That's why I'm always throwing confetti and DJing Zoom meetings. But I worried that leading with joy was inappropriate in a time of such fear and pain and loss, and I worried that it would be experienced as a disregard or a privileged avoidance of these realities. And let's be honest about the fact that Unitarian Universalists have made this mistake time and time and time again. But this is what the movement in North Carolina has taught me. Something that my 34 years in New England never did. As the poet Toy Derricott says, joy is an act of resistance. Joy is not counter to the movement, it is the purpose of the movement. Love and joy and rest and abundance, these are the things we are fighting for, and so these are the things we should be fighting with. That is the difference between a movement centered in the act of fighting against and a movement grounded in the act of creation. A movement that is loving and life-giving and, dare I say it, irresistible. So Peter, keep writing your justice songs. Kat, keep bringing your drum. Where's Kat today? Keep making meals and inviting new friends to break bread. Keep building trust and affection with your community partners, one act of solidarity at a time, because this is love. And love is the life source that sustains us. It is the beacon in the night sky that guides us. So nourish your spirit as if your life depended on it, as if all of our lives depend on it. Open yourself to receive every blessing. Know that it is your birthright. And that as people of faith, we must lean into the movement to help co-create a world where that birthright can be claimed by all. Friends, may we remember that we are held in the beloved community more loving and more powerful than we can even imagine. May we have faith that the darkest moments can give birth to something sacred and new. And if we ever feel alone, may we simply remember to look up at the moon. Amen.